Divorce lawyers of Reddit, what is the most insane, evil, funny, dumb, way a spouse has tried to screw the other? Yanal but work in the court system. One's case that came in was a couple divorcing on mutual terms. The husband had one child with her and the wife had a child from the previous marriage. He agreed to pay child support for both children. I guess he really cared about this other enough to support her even though it isn't his obligation. Judge signs the order, they go to set up the child support account and it gets kicked back saying you can't have two accounts for one child. Turns out she's been collecting child support from the biological father the entire time and never told him. She basically tried to milk two fathers for one child, and the other attorney knew about it. Not my case, but during my first year of law school lawyers from different practices came to give us a peek behind the curtain of different areas. The divorce lawyer told the story of rather well-to-do couple that spent months and months and many tens of thousands of dollars fighting over absolutely everything all the way down to a single ceramic ashtray. He couldn't remember the significance, but somehow it had come through the husband's family. Even after everything else had been decided, they spent many more months and nearly $100,000 fighting over just this ashtray. Then, after a court hearing, the wife finally won the ashtray. She promptly strode out to the white courthouse steps, and smashed the ceramic ashtray. Left the pieces all over for the husband to see on his way out. Decided that day I would not be a divorce lawyer. Dr. Spent $100,000 to win an ashtray only to smash it in spite. My friend's dad Alan is a lawyer and does mostly divorces and custody cases. The state where he practices had a lot of mediated divorces. I guess they're faster and cheaper than the traditional route. He had a couple come that had already figured out division of property, custody, support, etc. Alan figures it'll be a quick afternoon and he'll be home in time for dinner. He's reviewing everything with them and gets to the question of which parent should be called first if the child gets hurt or sick at school or camp. Well, for some reason this turned into a huge issue. Each parent wanted to be the one who was called first. The couple argued for an hour, for which Alan was being paid hundreds of dollars. After an hour, Alan suggested that they split, take a break, collect themselves and start discussions anew on another day or maybe talk about it on their own and come see Alan when they figured it out. Nope, the couple insisted on ironing it out right then and there. They fought for 6 hours while Alan just sat there and listened. They refused his help, they refused to come to an agreement. By this time it was almost 8 p.m. and Alan said, "I don't care what you two do, but I'm going home to my wife right now." For some reason, that seemed to make something click for them and they did eventually resolve it. Not sure why it took 6 hours and a couple of $1,000 to do it, but they did. Guess everyone has a hill to die on. Friend was going through divorce from insane husband. He had been texting her pics of the gun he bought and threatening her. Police were called. Nothing they could do because it was only a picture. He was staying with a secret girlfriend at this point. She allowed him to go get his stuff from the house. She was scared to go back in the house alone. I went with her. First red flag was he had changed the locks. So we waited for locksmith to open the house and change the locks again. Well, when the door opens, we noticed all of the furniture was gone. So we carefully went upstairs in search of her cats. The entire second floor was empty. No cats. No furniture. Even her clothes were gone. Come to find out he hired a moving company to pack and take everything, even the food in the fridge. Finally found the cats. He had taken them to another vet in town and put them up for boarding under his sister's name thinking she would not be able to find them. He was finally forced to disclose what happened to her possessions. He had them taken to a storage unit far away from the home. I don't practice divorce law, but I did an internship with a family law judge in law school that involved me sitting in on a lot of stuff. One divorced couple came in because the ex-husband wanted to lower his spousal support payments, due to his lowered income, great financial responsibilities, and the fact that his ex-wife was declining to seek paid employment, all of which sounds reasonable on the face. It turned out that while his income had been lowered due to cuts, his new wife, who technically worked as his assistant, and had done so prior to the divorce, was now making quadruple her salary, more than he ever had. He claimed that his ex-wife had unpaid renters living with her and could have money to survive if she charged them rent. It turned out they were the couple's shared 18-year-old twins who were living at home, having just graduating high school, and were going to keep living at home while starting college in the fall. It also later turned out that he allowed his stepdaughter and her 2 children to live with him and his wife rent-free and paid for her college. His ex-wife produced evidence that he told his own kids to figure out paying for college themselves. He claimed that his ex-wife worked as a nanny for free by choice and should be getting paid for work elsewhere. The kids she watched for free were their 3 joint grandchildren from their eldest child, 2 of which were severely disabled. He claimed that when he married his new wife he gained over 15 new dependents, which was technically true, but those dependents were all in Mexico and included his new wife's grown siblings and their families, none of whom he had ever met. TL:"Dr. My client's spouse accused him of giving his deceased wife cancer. I represented a guy who was on his second marriage. His first wife passed away from cancer. He and his kids were obviously devastated. My client was a pretty sensitive guy with a big heart. His second wife could be very charming, which was why he fell for her, but it was all a facade. Anyway, to make a long story about a lengthy divorce short, my client met a very kind and affectionate woman during his case. They really hit it off and were basically engaged, even though his divorce was far from over. The fiancé started having health problems and was diagnosed with a form of terminal cancer. Somehow the second wife found out about this and tried to use the cancer diagnosis against my client in court. She developed this crazy theory that my client had killed his first wife by giving her cancer and that he was doing the same thing to his fiancée. The second wife's attorney, who was quite good, refused to be a party to it. The attorney never addressed the argument in court and didn't even ask the second wife any questions about it during testimony. Rather, the attorney informed the judge that the second wife wished to address the court directly about an issue. The judge allowed her to do so, in a highly irregular move. The second wife told her crazy conspiracy theory to the judge, adding that she was certain my client had tried to give her cancer at some point as well. I wish I had an artist's rendering of the scene, capturing the second wife's crazy eyes, her attorney's look of shame/embarrassment, the judge's look of confusion/ennui, and my look of awe-inspired disgust. That is a good example of parental alienation, which is horrible for both the alienated parent, in this case, the mother, and the kids. Basically, the alienating parent, in this case, the father, uses the kids as a weapon to hurt their ex. This can be conscious or not, but is seriously damaging whatever the parent believes. The kids are conditioned to love one parent and hate the other, which destroys relationships and creates both short-term and long-term conflict and emotional damage. In my personal experience, as I grew older I became aware of the parental alienation. Actually, it sort of hit me all of a sudden not too long ago, and have slowly built back my relationship with my alienated parent, but my relationship with my other parent has gotten worse. In this case, my alienating parent truly believes that they have never done anything wrong, which makes getting along with them much harder. I am now trying to work through mental and behavioral issues that I have as a result of going through this, and a bunch of other stuff, in my adolescence. I can't regulate my emotions and don't have a properly developed personality. I still feel, and sometimes behave, like a 13 to 14-year-old, but am actually 18. Parental alienation is awful and I wish no parent or child ever had to go through it. I really hope that these children and their mother are doing okay, and if not, that things get better for them. This happened to my husband too. His ex got a judge to sign an order for his employer to garnish his wages. My husband paid every penny of his child support on time and only quit paying after his child was older than the age specified in his divorce decree. He talked to the police and they said it was a civil matter. We had to hire an attorney to go back to court and get the order rescinded. The judge didn't do anything to his ex that knowingly submitted false documents to the court and defrauded him of a few $1,000s. It was hilarious listening to his ex explain why she did it though. She claimed she thought the notice she received from the Attorney General's office was fake, and when questioned about that claimed that their son was really 2 years younger than the date on his birth certificate. The ex is not delusional, she lies like this all the time and most people are too polite to call her on it. Not my story but one I read here a couple of years ago. I really hope I don't butcher it as it's been a while, but here goes. There was a super wealthy guy that was a top exec at a Fortune 500 company who was getting a divorce, and it was rather nasty. This guy was pretty much set for life. He had a bunch of stock, houses, and assets in so many places. The ex-wife wanted everything she could possibly get. The husband came up with an idea that if she let him keep everything, he would give her half of his paycheck for the rest of his life. She quickly agreed because his checks were huge and this also included any bonuses which were in the millions. As soon as the paperwork was finalized, he quit his job and started to work part-time at a sporting goods store, I can't remember which one. This story was told by another employee there, not the actual guy that got divorced. Anyway, he still had all of his assets, so he would drive to work in a super expensive car, and one day the employee asked how he could possibly afford that car. The guy said he was set for life and didn't even need to work at all, but every Friday when he got his paycheck it made everything so worth it, knowing his ex-wife would only be getting about $150 per check. Long post, sorry for any mistakes, not my native language. There is a divorce in the story, but it is mainly about abuse. My country, Southern Europe. After graduating law school, I went to court one day and happened to watch a domestic violence/abuse criminal case trial. The plaintiff is a quiet young woman, perhaps in her mid-30s. The accused is absent, being represented by his lawyer, who immediately asks the court for an adjournment, saying that the accused is a medical doctor, performing surgery in a big town 2.5 hours away, but he wants to have an opportunity to testify, albeit in another date. The lawyer hands the court an official document by a state hospital, confirming the operation by the doctor. It's already 10 to 11 o'clock. I consider the adjournment a certainty. The three-judge court rejects the request. The presiding judge seems stricter than in previous cases. The court starts the trial in absentia. The plaintiff testifies. She comes from a Balkan capital, daughter of a university professor, and she is herself very much educated, postgraduate. She talks in a soft, fragile voice, looking mostly down, or at the presiding judge. He beat her. He locked her in their apartment. He left her with not enough food and no money to buy food for her and their some months-old baby. He had his parents, his brother, and his sister-in-law, who lived in the same family-owned apartment building, bring her food and check her out. He locked everybody else out of her life, one by one, her friends, her parents. Obviously she was not allowed to work, she didn't even seem to have access to a bank account. She was ashamed and afraid for a very long time, increasingly reluctant or unable to call for help or inform her parents, although they suspect something is very wrong. On 1 to 2 occasions she half-asked her husband Sil and his parents for help. They obviously told him, instead. One day, a Friday afternoon, he comes home. She dares to ask for milk for the baby. He grabs her and throws her against the wall. He punches her repeatedly. She screams, the baby cries, the whole apartment building echoes the commotion, but Noon wants, or dares to help her. He is not an alcoholic or even randomly drunk. He locks her inside and leaves. The next day, Saturday, he beats her again, even more violently. He grabs her, spreads her legs open and smashes her body on the bathtub rim, aiming for her vagina. She gets bruised all over her inner thighs and genitals. Again, she and the baby scream, but to no avail. He leaves. Her father-in-law visits the house. All he has to say is he's gone too far. He brings his wife, the mother of the accused, to check her daughter-in-law injuries, hastily, before he comes back. He is convicted, of course, and gets a jail sentence, suspended until his possible appeal is concluded. I'm afraid I can't be sure about his medical practice being suspended, though. I hope she is safe and happy, far away from him and this kind of people. Dr. Violently abusive husband severely beats wife and locks her and their baby in their home. When she escapes, he reports her of child abduction, having her arrested and forcing her to spend New Year's Eve in custody, in a cold border police outpost, while making a run for her original country. Edit, typos and clarifications. Not a divorce lawyer, but a child of a divorce. A few months before my parents started their divorce, my mom presented my dad with a life insurance policy out of nowhere. My dad had been suspicious of my mom for a couple of years, but this sent him into full paranoia. He decided to buy a device that records phone calls to see what my mom was saying to her, fucking evil, sister. Turns out they were coordinating how to have my dad killed and make it look like an accident. When my dad told me this, I was so upset that he would lie to me like that until a few months later he let me listen to the tape. I still have the tape to this day in my safe downstairs. You'll never know the feeling of listening to your mom talk about killing your dad to your aunt. As part of their 8-year divorce, they also did some fun things to each other. Mom flooded my dad's house by intentionally breaking the washing machine. Mom stole his work computer and all of his accounting files. He ran a business, and almost put him under because he didn't know who to bill. Dad would sit outside of my mom's house and record her mowing the lawn so he could argue she wasn't too sick to work. Dad simply wouldn't pay her any child support or alimony after the divorce was finalized. It caused her house to be foreclosed on. Those were just a couple of things that they did to each other. Shit like this went on for years. I had a co-worker whose husband, a doctor, threw her out of the house that they shared for more than 30 years. He had a new girlfriend and wanted her to move in. She had no idea he was cheating on her. Since she was working for him, she was left with nothing. No job, no money, he canceled her cards and bank accounts, and nowhere to live. In a hurry to work, she only found a minimum wage job, and a tiny studio apartment. At that time she was in her early 60s and not in good health. He dragged that divorce for years, gave money to their spoiled kids, so they took his side. I never understood why someone could be so mean to the woman he once loved, the mother of his children. A woman who worked for him for years, helping him build his practice. The only explanation I can find is his love of money. Finally, a couple of years later, he was accused of sexual misconduct and lost his license. Technically he retired. His beautiful house has been for sale for months now, and it's probably going to be demolished for a new development. I have no idea if the girlfriend is still with him, but in a perfect scenario I hope she left him. As for my co-worker, we lost touch after I left the store, but I hope she found happiness. My dad went through some financial troubles. One day he decided he could have more money if he chose not to pay mortgages, property taxes, car notes, etc. Eventually he was arrested for tax evasion, and my mom found out and immediately filed for divorce. My mom was a shopaholic and took no about, as well as a toddler being told they can't have ice cream. She insisted my dad didn't make enough money and kept maxing out her Amex weekly. Thus my dad's solution. During the divorce, she said she wanted the nice cars. Great, take them. Then she told my dad she wanted the house. My dad begged and pleaded with her not to take the house. Point blank told her that the house was days away from being foreclosed on. He told her that she couldn't afford to take that hit on her credit, but she really wanted to stick it to him, so she thought he was bluffing. After a week of mediation, he finally gave in and said, "Fine, take the house." The house and the mortgage were transferred into her name, and the house was foreclosed on and a lien was placed on the house. Through some shady deal, she short-sold the house without informing the new owner of the lien, failed to claim it on her taxes, and spent the money. When the new owner finds out, she is screwed. Not to mention, if the IRS ever comes to collect capital gains. All because she wanted to screw over my dad. Clarification/edit 1, I changed lien to lien. B. I'm fairly oblivious to how home owning/mortgages work, i.e. I don't know how to spell lien. This is the story from how I understood it. My dad was arrested for tax evasion, not defaulting on a loan. I could have been clearer.